Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Abby's disappearance sent a vibration of pure terror through Genoa City, the kind of fear that people try to rationalize away at first. Maybe she's busy, maybe she's avoiding someone, maybe she's just clearing her mind, but deep down, everyone who knew Abby Newman Abbott Chancellor felt that something was terribly, unforgivably wrong. And as the city buzzed with theories, whispered secrets, and frantic questions, Victoria, Ashley, Devin, Victor, and Chance found themselves tangled in a mystery so dark, so twisted, that even the Newman power couldn't shield them from the truth that was slowly tightening its grip around them. It began 3 nights ago when Abby failed to come home, and despite her independent streak, her family instantly sensed the abnormality. Her phone was abandoned at society, still unlocked, the last message half-typed as if she'd been ripped away mid-thought. The security cameras outside flickered with static right at the moment she stepped outside, and every sign pointed to one haunting fact. She had been taken by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, someone who knew her patterns, someone who knew her family's weaknesses, someone who knew how to bait a trap that Abby would walk into without hesitation. And as Chance sat in Chancellor Winters staring at the still frame of Abby's last known moment, he could feel the blood roaring in his ears, not with fear but with guilt. How could he have let this happen again? How could danger keep circling the woman he loved? How could someone breach her world so violently without leaving a trace? And yet something about the image bothered him, the way Abby glanced over her shoulder moments before vanishing, as if she recognized the person approaching her, and that detail gnawed at him like a parasite feeding on panic, pushing him deeper into an obsession to uncover what really happened in those few stolen seconds. Meanwhile, Victor Newman rallied his empire as only he could, summoning private investigators, tapping security networks, calling in favors from old alliances, barking orders with the force of a man who refused to lose another family member to the shadows. But even Victor could not anticipate the chilling revelation uncovered by one of his analysts. The digital distortion on the footage wasn't random, it was manually altered, overwritten by someone using a high-level encryption mask, a technique rarely seen outside government training. And when Chance heard that detail, the room spun because that technique, that signature, that specific inconsistency belonged to only one person he had ever encountered, one man from his past missions, a ghost who disappeared years ago, someone connected to a file Chance hoped he would never have to open again, someone thought to be dead, someone believed to have been burned out of existence by an explosion in the Middle East. Asher Kincaid, Chance's former partner, a man once loyal, brilliant, highly trained, and emotionally unstable, whose betrayal nearly cost Chance his life, a man whose name was erased from every record except one classified file locked deep in federal archives. Chance had never told Abby the full story of Asher because the darkness of that past was something he didn't want touching her world, but now, as he stood over the distorted footage, he felt a frost settle into his bones. Asher might be alive, and if Asher was alive, then Abby was in unimaginable danger because Asher didn't simply take hostages, he made statements, he built psychological labyrinths, he constructed chaos brick by brick, targeting emotional pressure points, and Abby, sweet unassuming Abby, would be the perfect way to punish Chance for walking away from the mission that ended their partnership and their friendship. While this sickening truth began to crystallize, Ashley Abbott spiraled through a storm of panic, calling hospitals, airports, local police precincts, anyone who might have seen her daughter, tearing apart the house for any clue. Unable to breathe whenever she imagined Abby hurt, Abby alone, Abby calling out for help, and in the middle of her breakdown Tucker arrived, offering support, his eyes filled with something Ashley wasn't prepared for, genuine fear, because Tucker had received an anonymous message earlier, a cryptic warning that said only, "The sins you ignore come back through the ones you love." And though Tucker hid his reaction, he suspected the message connected to a business deal he thought he'd buried, but he said nothing yet. Meanwhile, Devin, determined to help, dug into the financial anomalies surrounding society, and found that the restaurant's power grid had been hacked hours before Abby vanished, something no random kidnapper would bother doing. And that discovery sent Devin to Victor, who immediately connected the dots: military-grade tampering, encryption masking, zero-trace footprints. The pattern was unmistakable, and the silence surrounding Abby's disappearance was too orchestrated, too calculated, too smart, and Victor, though never visibly shaken, felt a father's dread pulling at him with each passing minute. While the men searched the city, Abby herself awoke in a cold warehouse, her wrists bound, her head throbbing, her vision blurry, the metallic smell of old machinery mixing with dust so thick it turned the air almost grainy. And as she struggled to orient herself, a voice echoed from behind her, soft, eerie, disturbingly familiar, saying, "You always were the weak spot." And Abby froze because that voice wasn't Chance's, wasn't anyone from her family. It was a stranger, a man. Lurking in shadow, pacing slowly as though savoring her confusion, and as he stepped forward, his face emerged, sharp jawline, piercing eyes, a scar running from his temple to his cheek, a presence so unsettling Abby felt the temperature drop just from his proximity, as he crouched beside her and whispered, "Your husband took everything from me, so now I'll take everything from him." And despite her fear, Abby's instincts flared, recognizing that this wasn't a random vendetta. This man wanted Chance to suffer, which meant she had leverage, but before she could speak, Asher pressed a finger to her lips and said, "He thinks I'm dead. Isn't that delightful?" Confirming what Chance feared most. Back in Genoa City, Chance finally revealed the truth to the Newmans and Abbotts. Asher Kincaid wasn't just a former partner, he was a ticking bomb wrapped in human skin, a man obsessed with control, someone who once declared that attachments make men weak. And Abby becoming Chance's attachment made her the perfect pawn. Victor exploded with rage, demanding Chance lead them to Asher, but Chance explained the horrifying twist. Asher anticipated every move before it happened. He set traps, he misled patterns, he manipulated emotional reactions, and the only way to find him was to think like him. Cold, calculating, morally detached. And Chance feared he no longer could step into that mindset without losing something he wouldn't get back. Ashley demanded answers, demanded Chance fix this, and as guilt suffocated him, Chance vowed he wouldn't stop until Abby was in his arms again. Meanwhile, Asher revealed his plan to Abby, explaining how he had watched her for days, studied her habits, waited for the moment she'd be vulnerable, and his fixation was not only revenge but curiosity. "What makes someone like you love someone like him?" he asked, circling her like a predator fascinated by its prey. And Abby, though terrified, held onto her bravest facade, refusing to give him the satisfaction of her panic. Hours passed before Asher left her alone in the dim warehouse, but Abby twisted her wrists until the rope frayed enough to loosen, and though she freed one hand, she didn't escape. She chose instead to explore quietly, finding a rusty pipe, using it as a tool to wedge open a decaying side panel leading to a narrow crawl space. But before she could slip inside, Asher returned, catching her grabbing her by the arm with a force that jolted her entire body, and he hissed, "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Good. It'll make this game more interesting," before chaining her to a steel pillar this time. Back in town, Tucker finally confessed the anonymous message he received, and Victor nearly lunged at him for withholding information, but Tucker insisted he didn't connect it to Abby until now, revealing that years ago he crossed paths with a man involved in covert operations who threatened retribution for breaking an agreement. When Tucker described him, Chance confirmed it. Asher had been watching long before the kidnapping. With this new lead, Chance located one of Asher's old hideouts outside Genoa City, a decayed training facility once used for off-record missions, and when Chance, Victor, Devon and Tucker stormed the site, they found evidence Abby had been there. Her bracelet on the ground, rope fibers, footprints. But the space was empty, Asher long gone, leaving behind only a taunting message spray-painted on a concrete pillar. "A chance to save her, if you're quick enough." And that message pushed Chance into a state of determination so sharp it bordered on madness. As Abby hung on to consciousness in her new location, an abandoned shipping port, she heard footsteps again, and this time Asher seemed different, agitated, pacing rapidly, muttering about the timeline speeding up. And Abby sensed cracks forming in his mental armor, cracks she might exploit, so she whispered, "You don't have to do this," trying to appeal to whatever shred of humanity he might have left, but Asher snapped back that humanity was a myth, a weakness he had eradicated long ago, especially after Chance betrayed him by choosing civilian life over the mission that defined them. But Abby, digging into something deeper, said, "You're angry because he moved on and you didn't." And for a moment Asher froze, the truth hitting him like a blade, but before he could react, the sound of engines outside signaled someone approaching, and Asher's paranoia skyrocketed. He grabbed Abby, dragged her to a back exit, preparing to relocate her again, but as he shoved open the door, a spotlight burst through the fog, illuminating him in a blinding white beam. Chance had found them. The confrontation exploded instantly. Asher shoved Abby behind him, pulling a weapon, aiming it at Chance, while Abby screamed for Chance to stop, but Chance, with years of suppressed adrenaline flooding his veins, stared down his former partner and said, "Let her go, Asher. This ends tonight." And Asher laughed, an unhinged sound echoing against the shipping containers, taunting Chance with accusations of abandonment, betrayal, acting as though this spectacle was his rightful justice. As police sirens grew louder, Asher pressed the barrel against Abby's temple, demanding Chance drop his gun, and though Chance complied, he locked eyes with Abby, silently promising her protection. Victor, arriving behind the tactical team, shouted for Asher to stand down, but Asher only tightened his grip on Abby, dragging her toward the water's edge, threatening to take her with him, and in a split second of chaos, Abby stomped on Asher's foot, twisting away just enough for Chance to tackle him, sending both men crashing onto the concrete, the gun skidding across the pavement, and Abby sprinted to Victor just as Asher and Chance traded brutal blows, years of rage erupting in each strike, until Asher grabbed a shard of metal, swinging it toward Chance's throat, but Chance overpowered him, slamming him to the ground as officers swarmed in to restrain him. Abby collapsed into Chance's arms, trembling, crying, clinging to him like he was the only solid thing left in the world, and Chance held her so tightly it felt like his entire body was protecting her at once, whispering, "I've got you. I'm here. I'm so sorry." While Abby sobbed that she knew he'd come for her, she never doubted him, not for a second. As Asher was dragged away screaming that this wasn't over, that he'd finish what he started, Victor wrapped his coat around Abby, glaring at Asher with deadly promise, and Ashley, arriving seconds later, fell to her knees sobbing as she hugged her daughter, overwhelmed with relief that Abby was alive. And while everyone embraced, Chance stared at Asher being taken into custody, knowing deep down that the battle with his past wasn't truly over. But for tonight Abby was safe, alive, breathing in the arms of the man she loved, and Genoa City, shaken and terrified for days, finally exhaled. Yet the question lingered in the back of every mind. If Asher Kincaid survived the explosion that was meant to kill him, who else from Chance's past might be lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike? The night of Abby's rescue should have brought peace, but Genoa City never breathes for long. And as dawn crept over the skyline like a pale and exhausted witness to the previous day's rage, the truth settled in everyone's bones. Something was still wrong, something in the way Asher had shouted that it wasn't over, something in the strange glint in his eyes when he was dragged into the police van, something in the chilling certainty he radiated that he hadn't acted alone. And that single detail slithered like smoke into the minds of Victor, Chance, Ashley, Abby, Devin, and even Tucker, binding them together in a tension that vibrated beneath the surface of every heartbeat. Abby, wrapped in blankets at Memorial Hospital, couldn't shake the eerie feeling that Asher knew too much about her life, too much about her routines, too much about her private world, as if someone had been feeding him scraps, insights, schedules, vulnerabilities, someone inside Genoa City who wanted her gone or wanted Chance broken or wanted the Newmans destabilized, and that thought pressed on her chest like a stone she couldn't lift. As Abby drifted in and out of sleep, haunted by flashes of cold warehouses, metallic smells, Asher's taunts, the scrape of chains against concrete, and the unnerving moment he whispered that her family always left cracks, Victor stood guard at the doorway like a storm made of muscle and fury, refusing to leave the hospital, refusing to rest, refusing to accept that Asher's capture meant closure, because Victor Newman understood one thing better than most. Enemies who return from the dead rarely return alone. And behind every ghost is a puppeteer with bigger ambitions. Across town, Chance worked with the GCPD to process Asher, sitting across from him in the interrogation room where Asher smirked like a man amused by his own survival, refusing to answer questions, refusing to acknowledge guilt, refusing to cooperate, offering only cryptic statements, like, "You're not listening to the right voices," and, "I didn't start this. I was activated," which sliced through Chance like ice because activated was language from their covert past, language no civilian would ever use, language tied to operations they swore were buried forever. When Chance pressed him, demanding to know who activated him, Asher leaned forward slowly, deliberately, the metal shackles clinking like the ticking of a bomb, and murmured, "Ask your father," before chuckling at Chance's stunned silence, then casually adding, "Oh wait, he doesn't even know what he did, does he?" And though Chance slammed his fist on the table, the rage was mixed with a chilling realization. Asher believed someone connected to Chance's lineage, someone with power or information, had triggered his return. Meanwhile, Ashley paced her living room in a frenzy bordering on emotional combustion, replaying every moment from Abby's childhood to adulthood, trying to understand how this nightmare slithered into their lives, blaming herself for not noticing anything, sooner asking Jack and Tracy and anyone who came near her if they had seen anything unusual in the days leading up to Abby's disappearance, but each question led only to more uncertainty and more dread. Tucker, watching Ashley unravel, confessed a second detail he had kept secret. Not only did he receive a warning before Abby was taken, but someone had attempted to break into his encrypted business files a week earlier, and the signatures attached to the hack resembled ones tied to a group Tucker once collaborated with during an off-record negotiation overseas, a group rumored to act as brokers for covert operatives who had gone rogue or missing, a group known only by a symbol, a serpent wrapped around an hourglass. And when Tucker revealed that symbol, Chance felt his stomach twist because that symbol was whispered about during his intelligence training, referenced only in cautionary briefings about hidden networks that reactivated burned agents by feeding them new targets. Devon, processing all this, insisted they needed to dig deeper, especially because the group Tucker described might not just want vengeance, they might want leverage, and the Newmans were the richest leverage any shadow organization could dream of. Back at Memorial, Abby jolted awake from a nightmare drenched in panic, her pulse galloping, her eyes wild, gripping Victor's arm as she gasped. He wasn't working alone. He kept talking to someone he called the architect, and Victor froze, not because the name meant anything to him, but because Abby's voice trembled with certainty, not fear, and she swore she heard Asher speaking to someone over a radio transmission the night before she tried to escape through the crawl space, someone who gave him orders in short, rigid sentences, someone who seemed to be tracking Chance's movements, someone who claimed Chance owed them blood. And Victor knew that whoever this architect was, they were the true danger, the puppet master behind the entire ordeal. As Abby recounted more details, the faint static of the radio, the metallic clink of a remote device Asher kept close, the way he nervously checked messages when she mentioned Chance's name. Chance entered the room, overhearing enough to feel his heart drop into an icy void, because Abby describing the architect mirrored exactly the covert handler role used in their classified missions, and that role was always filled by someone with frightening intelligence, someone who played chess with human lives, someone who thrived in anonymity, someone who was never supposed to operate on American soil. Abby broke down in tears as Chance held her, whispering that he would tear down every wall to protect her, but beneath his vow, a war raged inside him. If the architect was real, then Chance's past had spilled into Genoa City in the most catastrophic way. Later that night, as the city tried to regain its balance, a blackout rippled across the eastern grid, just long enough to drop the security cameras at the detention center holding Asher, and for 47 seconds the facility plunged into darkness, and when the lights blinked back on, Asher was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only two chilling things: a guard unconscious on the floor with a tranquilizer dart in his neck, and a message smeared across the interrogation mirror in black ink. Round 2 begins with the dawn. The moment the escape was reported, Victor roared in fury, demanding emergency lockdowns, demanding federal involvement, demanding retribution, while Ashley collapsed into a chair shaking uncontrollably at the thought of Abby being hunted again. And Abby herself, though terrified, felt a new fire burning in her chest. A fire fueled by the need to understand why Asher wanted Chance broken, why she was targeted, why this architect spoke about debts, why Asher hinted that this war started long before she ever met Chance. Chance immediately took command, convinced Asher couldn't have escaped alone. Someone had breached the grid. Someone had provided coordinates. Someone knew the building's layout. Someone had slipped into Genoa City unnoticed. Someone with training equal to or greater than Asher's. And Chance's mind sifted through the ghosts of his past until one name surfaced like a shark fin slicing through still water: Elias Ward, an intelligence handler presumed dead after a covert helicopter crash. A man rumored to have built a network of rogue operatives in the shadows, a man nicknamed the Architect within elite circles, a man Chance once trusted before realizing Elias manipulated everyone under him like pieces on a board. If Elias Ward was alive, then Asher was merely the opening move in a far larger threat. Victor demanded Chance explain everything he knew, and Chance, exhausted and tormented, revealed for the first time that months before he met Abby, he refused to follow a morally corrupt order from Elias, an order that would have led to innocent casualties, and in doing so, chance effectively dismantled Elias's mission and severed the architect's influence, an act that would have made Chance a target for retribution. Abby, hearing this, realized Asher's obsession wasn't just about revenge or betrayal. It was part of a vendetta engineered by a man who saw Chance as a loose end that had never been tied cleanly. As they processed this new terror, an emergency alert sounded on Chance's phone. Asher's escape vehicle had been spotted 2 miles from Newman Tower, abandoned and burned, with a single object left on the passenger seat. A necklace Abby wore during her kidnapping, one she lost in the warehouse, now returned like a taunt, like a breadcrumb, like a promise that Asher was watching. Abby's knees nearly buckled when she saw the photograph of the necklace, and Ashley screamed that they needed to flee the city, but Abby refused, insisting they couldn't run from someone who wanted psychological warfare. They had to confront this head-on. Victor agreed, declaring that if Elias Ward was alive and operating on his territory, then the architect had declared war on the Newmans, and Victor's voice curled into a threat sharp enough to cut steel as he vowed. He thinks he knows how to play games. He hasn't met me. At that same moment, Asher, bloodied from his escape but grinning like a man reborn, stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, clutching a burner phone that lit up with a single message from the architect. The next phase begins. Prepare the girl. And Asher's smile widened with twisted devotion, whispering, "Understood," before disappearing into the night, leaving only the wind to carry the unspoken truth. Abby's nightmare wasn't over, it was mutating, evolving, spiraling into something far deadlier, and the city itself seemed to shiver under the weight of a storm it wasn't prepared to face.